Good day and welcome back to Unbiased Magic Reviews, the most objective magic review channel here on YouTube. Today I have a requested magic review for you guys. I was recently asked to review Just Think: Miracles for Magicians and Mentalists by R. Paul Wilson. Now you can pick this up for $30 directly from R. Paul Wilson on his Gumroad site, where you will get a 20-page ebook as well as video instruction, and you will learn his interpretation of Dai Vernon's colossal out of sight, out of mind mentalism effect with playing cards. Now, I'm a big fan of this plot, and so I couldn't help myself but to do this review. The premise is so simple to understand, yet so powerful. A spectator is asked to think of a card, and you mentally find it. That's what it is in a nutshell, and Dai Vernon's original version, Out of Sight, Out of Mind, still holds very strong even to this day. There has been a lot of people that have tried to improve it and change it, but very few actually have made any real improvements. Even Dai Vernon himself tried to improve it, and we're going to get into that shortly. I think it was Al Baker that once said that the quickest way to kill an effect is to try to improve it. So as usual, I'm going to give you guys a very small background on this card plot. We're going to go over what's included here in this ebook. I'm going to give you guys my analysis and rating, and then finally as well some recommendations. Along the way, I'll give you guys thoughts and try to answer those questions you have about this. So this card plot originated by Dai Vernon taking an idea out of Expert at the Card Table, and it was first described actually in Greater Magic in the 1930s, where they described Vernon's shuffle sequence that he used. But it wasn't until 1960 that Louis Ganson actually published the full routine as Dai Vernon performed it in Dai Vernon's More Inner Secrets of Card Magic. And as I mentioned, to this day, the original version is just as strong as it was, and it's very workable. You can use it exactly the way that it is. If you're not familiar with the original version, just to give you a really simple idea of what it looked like, you would show the spectator 9 cards and ask them to think of one. Then you would shuffle the deck. Remember, this is impromptu, right? You can use any deck for this. And then afterwards, the professor would look away and have the spectator look at the cards as he passes them in his hand, and then he would stop and ask them, did you see your card yet? If they say yes, okay. And then finally he would deal cards onto the table until he got the sensation that, okay, I think we're at the right spot. He would ask the spectator what their card was. They would turn over the card, and it's their mentally thought of card. That was the original effect. Very strong effect, as I mentioned. And so the way people have tried to improve it is that they've either tried to add cards or take cards away, change where in the deck that they show them the cards, maybe from the middle, also changing the shuffle sequence. Like, some people didn't like it because they thought it was too complicated. And so they made different changes, and like I said, very few of these variations are any real improvements on the original. So let's take a look at what R. Paul Wilson has done here, and like I said, along the way I'm going to give you my thoughts. Alright, so let's get into what is included in this ebook. So the first version of Out of Sight, Out of Mind is called Out of Your Mind, and in this version Paul Wilson has a deck of cards that's in use. It's impromptu, so it can be the spectator's deck shuffled. He's going to show them a group of cards and ask them to think of one. The cards are then shuffled, and then you tell the spectator that you want them to, look for their card. You're going to show them the deck, the cards. Don't tell them, don't say anything, but just look for your card. And then at some point you say, did you see your card? They say yes or no. You show them some more. When they confirm that they've seen their card, now there's some cutting of the cards, and you look at the cards, and then finally you ask the spectator to name their card, and it's either going to be on the top of the deck, on the bottom, or it's going to be reversed in the middle when you spread the deck. That is the main handling that Paul Wilson offers here, and you can see that he's changed the effect from a mental effect to more like a magical effect because it's more like a magical location effect more than anything else, because now you're looking at the cards. In the original version, you never look at the cards, and in this version as well, the card is either going to end up, like I said, on the top or on the bottom. There's not that dealing procedure where you stop, where you get a sensation of where the card is. The other thing that you may not like about this main handling is that you need to remember 3 cards kind of in a weird order, and that could be something that you could screw up. If you are interested, the main shuffle sequence of this version actually was published in Genie Magazine 2001, because the 2001 December Genie Magazine was a tribute to Dai Vernon, and there Richard Kaufman actually also published an improved version of the original Out of Sight, Out of Mind effect, and he included also a little blurb with Paul Wilson's shuffle sequence. So if you are interested to learn his shuffle sequence, you can learn it there. Here in this ebook, what Paul Wilson has changed is the revelation is totally different now. Now the second version that's taught is called Easy Usi or Easy Out of Sighty, and this is a semi-self-working version where, again, a shuffle deck in use impromptu. The magician shows the spectator a group of cards and asks them to think of one. And now, instead of going into a shuffle sequence, you simply are dividing the deck into 3 piles. And then once you're done doing that, you ask the spectator to look through each pile to see if they see their card. When they confirm that they saw their card, the revelation's totally different now, because you're going to do what he calls do you believe revelation, where basically you're looking at the cards, you take a joker and you put it in the spread, and you tell them that you've placed the joker next to their card. Do they believe? You ask them, vote, and you try to believe, and you show them that now the joker is right next to their card. So this version really is a location trick, and it feels like a glorified 21 card trick, because you're making 3 piles and asking them to look through each pile to look for their card. There's no difficult sleight of hand, and as I mentioned, it is semi-self-working. Personally, I really didn't think it was great, but some people, like I always tell you guys, may like that. The revelation of that was interesting because it was a little different, but that being said, it was not anything groundbreaking. The next version that's taught is called Out of Pocket, and the main difference here in this variation is that you're going to possibly, the mental selection could end up in your pocket. Now the downside is you have to palm 3 cards and you have to remember those 3 cards. So I didn't even play around with that version because it just seemed like it was more trouble than it was worth. And again, the effect is totally changed because now it's like the mental selection jumped into your pocket kind of thing. And like I said, it's only going to happen like 30% of the time, so it's not even guaranteed like it's actually going to work out. Next, he goes over something he calls Determination D, which is just a reference to an idea that was published in Erdenace's Expert at the Card Table on how you can tell if a spectator has seen their card. He just makes a reference. He doesn't actually tell you what it is. He tells you to go and find it in Expert at the Card Table. So that was a real waste completely. The next thing he goes over is an effect he calls Think Stop, which is extremely basic, and you probably already do something very similar to it. In a nutshell, a spectator is asked to glimpse a card, peek a card. They peek a card, the cards are shuffled, and then you tell them that you're going to deal the cards face up, and you want them to think in their mind, stop when they see their card, but don't say anything out loud. And then you, of course, stop at the right place because you get that sensation, and that's called Think Stop. And I've done something similar to this for years. You probably have too. And then finally, the very last thing in the ebook is called Vernon's Revelation, and it's basically the exact same revelation that Vernon used in his original Out of Sight, Out of Mind effect, which is nothing new and totally redundant and did not need to be published in this ebook for any reason, probably just to take up space. So my analysis of this is, as I mentioned before, there's really nothing groundbreaking here. And I think that Paul Wilson has totally changed the effect from a mental effect with playing cards into more of a magical location trick. So he's totally lost sight of what Dai Vernon intended with this effect, and I think that it's inferior to the original version and many other versions that I'm going to recommend to you guys shortly. Of note, if you are interested, like I said to you, about checking out other ideas with the original version, I did mention the December 2001 Genie magazine. You can also check out Jared Koff's version, which is called Out of Sight But Not Out of Mind, and that was published in Joe Barry's Modus Operandi issue 4. And the reason I mention it is because I liked how Jared Koff presented this as, when you give the deck to the spectator and you ask them to shuffle, if they do an overhand shuffle, after you show them the cards and they think of one, you do an overhand shuffle. If they do a Hindu shuffle, then after you show them the cards, when you do the mixing procedure, you do a Hindu shuffle. If they do an in the hands riffle shuffle, you do an in the hands riffle shuffle. If they do a table riffle shuffle, you do a table riffle shuffle. And so the idea being that because you're mixing the cards the same way the spectator did, it's just going to feel a lot more natural. And I thought that was really clever. So I mentioned that to you guys if you want to hunt that down and check that out. Let's take a look at my rating, and then I'm going to get into my recommendations for what I think you guys should take a look at. So in terms of creativity, I rate this as 3 out of 5. And the main reason is because I thought that his Do You Believe revelation was very creative. That being said, I didn't think anything else here was really groundbreaking overall. So even his shuffle sequence, there's a lot of versions that are very similar. So creativity wise, it's like plus or minus, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt and gave him 3 out of 5. For the teaching category, I gave him 4 out of 5. I think that the ebook is very clear and easy to understand, as well as the video instruction that he supplies. For practicality, I rate this as 4 out of 5 because all you need is a deck of cards and it is impromptu in nature. For comparison with other versions, the next category, I would actually rate this as 1 out of 5, and that's because this really can't compare with other versions out there because it's no longer a mental effect with cards, as I mentioned, and there are so many other versions that are a lot better. In terms of audience reaction, I would rate it as 3 out of 5. You will get good reactions with it, but you're not going to get the same reactions that you will by performing the original version or the ones I'm going to recommend to you. And then finally, the price, I would rate it as 1 out of 5. And the main reason for that is because a lot of this stuff, like I said, is redundant. I don't think that it really warrants $30 for this. There's just a couple of new ideas there. And like I mentioned, a lot of this stuff is stuff that, I mean, there's very little here that's new, really, overall, especially if you have the December 2001 Genie magazine. There's going to be very little that's new here, except for maybe the Revelation, which I would actually recommend you stick with the original Revelation of Dai Vernon. So my final rating of this is 2.67 out of 5. So of course I would recommend that you don't buy this, that you stay away from it, and instead you take a look at some of these other recommendations I have for you guys. So my first recommendation for you is a version that was published by Jerry Sadowitz, and it was actually published with Peter Duffy in the book Inspirations. And there it was called Out of Order. And so you can actually pick this up, I think, from library.com for about $30. It's an excellent book. There's so many good routines in there. But the reason why I recommend this version, this Jerry Sadowitz version, is because he had an interesting solution to when you have to ask the spectator to look through the deck to see if they see their card, because the reason is you have to have an idea of what part of the deck their selection is in. And Jerry Sadowitz has a very elegant solution to that where there's no questions asked, really. You're simply, doing what he tells you, and it's extremely clever. You have to check it out. And if you know anything of Jerry Sadowitz, you won't be surprised at all. Borderline genius, really. Very smart guy. And so obviously this is my first recommendation to you guys if you are interested in this plot, because I think you're going to really like a lot his handling of it. My next recommendation goes to Bob King in his version called Far Out of Sight, and this was published in his book, The Ultimate Breather Crimp Volume 1. Now, I got the book as part of a set when I bought a whole lot of magic books on eBay. Maybe you could get actually an electronic version. I don't even know if that exists. I don't know where you can get it anymore. Now, Bob King, we all know, very famous magician, especially because of his new wave prediction effect that you guys know about. But in this version of Out of Sight, Out of Mind, the reason why I'm recommending it is because Bob King has totally cleaned up the shuffle sequence by using a breather crimp card, and you don't have to hold any breaks at all. It's super simple and super easy, and it just looks very natural in the hands. And it's interesting because I can make a direct comparison with Ryan Plunkett's version that he published recently in his book Distilled. Ryan Plunkett tried to improve the shuffle sequence by using a breather crimp card, but instead it actually is really messy, especially the ending, because you have to do like a pinky pull down of 3 cards. It's absolutely horrible. So instead, I would recommend the Bob King version. Check that out if you're interested, because it's a really nice improvement on the shuffle sequence of the effect. Next up, next recommendation is for Roy Walton's effect, Thanks for the Memories, and this was published in the Complete Walton Volume 3. Now, the reason why I recommend this one is because after you show literally 12 cards to the spectator, you're going to do a legit shuffle of those 12 cards into the deck, and it doesn't even have to be perfect, but you do a complete shuffle, and what happens is, again, just like in the original, you never look at the cards. You show the cards to the spectator, you're asking them if they saw their card or not. And what's really nice about it is that, just like in the original, you're going to deal cards face down, and you're going to stop at a certain point, ask them what their card is, and their card is going to be there. It's very, very clever. It uses the Vernon revelation in a very smart way. And if you know anything about Roy Walton, you will not be surprised to hear how clever that this is. Again, highly recommended, especially just because it really cleans up the shuffling part if that's an issue that you've had, and it's super easy to perform, and it just looks really spectacular. It gets amazing reactions. And then finally, my last recommendation, and this recommendation is my strongest because this is my favorite version of Out of Sight, Out of Mind, and this version actually belongs to Max Maven. You may remember that I talked about this version when I did my whole review on Max Maven. It was called Out of Mind. You can find it on the second DVD of KFAB. And the reason why I like it so much is because Max Maven put a lot of psychological thinking into how to eliminate the fishing sequence. So the part where the spectator has to look at the cards to give you an idea of what part of the deck it's in is completely cleaned up. The Max Maven version, all the movements are really, refined, and it's my favorite version. It looks like a complete miracle. I can't recommend it enough. So those are my recommendations to you guys. Just summing up, I would recommend that you guys stay away from this version by Paul Wilson and instead check out one of the ones that I recommend to you guys. As usual, if you have any questions or comments about this review, just leave me a comment below. Thanks so much for tuning into my reviews, guys, and I'll see you on the next magic review.